It's not a typical street. There are a lot of people parked in the right-of-way. There are a lot of places where there aren't sidewalks, there aren't safe places to cross, there aren't safe places to park. The roadway is dangerous. The condition of the roadway itself is not that great, and it's been a subject of debate for a long, long time. So I wanted to stress at the outset that this is the beginning of a process to improve North End Boulevard. No decisions have been made. No decisions will be made tonight. And we will be taking your input after we see the various alternatives that are going to be presented based on the research that was done last summer. So I will say one other thing, and that is we have a sign-up sheet here. I understand that Mass DOT had a small sign-up sheet on the way in. We have another one here, and I'd just like, as the meeting gets started, to pass it down one side and then ask you to pass it to the other. And if you want to get further information as we go along or get updates as we go along, please sign the sign-in sheet with an email address so that we can contact you, and we will follow up. We will also follow up directly with Ray Champagne at the SBBA and with Tom Saab at the Citizens for Change. So if you prefer to get your information through those groups, that's fine as well. But if you want direct communication from us as we move on down the road here, please use the sign-in sheet. So I'd just like to ask Freeman if you could pass this back, and anybody that wishes to fill it in, go down this side and then perhaps up the other side. So let me start by introducing Frank Szynski, who is the Project Development Engineer at District 4, Mass Department of Transportation. The Mass DOT is divided into regional districts, and District 4 is the district that deals with all of the Mass Department of Transportation projects in this area. All state roads, and as you know, North End Boulevard is a state road, fall under the jurisdiction of the Mass Department of Transportation. So I'm going to introduce Frank, let him say a few words. He can introduce his team. He has some fellow members here from District 4, and then we'll get right to the consulting engineers. So, Frank.
Thank you, Neil. Again, my name is Frank Szynski. I'm with MassDOT District 4. I'm the Project Development Engineer. I've been in that capacity for about 13 years. And like Neil had said last year, he had spoken to me about the concerns, and I've heard and seen some of the letters from the abutters regarding flooding and drainage and the potholes, and we acknowledge that the pavement condition is poor. And in looking at it from project development standpoint, certainly the roadway we know is in poor condition, the pavement anyway, and then there's a lot going on out there within that 75 feet of roadway out there. So as part of the project development process, I initiated getting some survey to come up and do an assessment of the drainage, because one of the things I do understand is the pavement's in poor condition. Before I resurface the roadway, I need to make sure that the infrastructure underneath is adequate for any of the future needs. So we got a contract together, we did some survey. People's interest got piqued by seeing men in vests, and questions were started. So Neil wanted to hold this meeting this summer for you folks who are two very important groups of stakeholders that we want to reach out to. So I want to thank you all for showing up, and I'm glad there is a good turnout. Now, what we're going to be presenting tonight is 3 concepts that we came up with as engineers looking to redistribute in a more orderly fashion, look at what's out there for existing right-of-way, how it's being used now, and what some of the big picture stuff. So these 3 concepts that we're going to show you are what we think is the starting point, meaning the top of the line. This is for all users, and this is why we want to explain, at least tonight, show you those 3 concepts. We really want to hear feedback from you as far as what you like about the differences between the concepts and how those, I know you're interested in how it impacts your property, my driveway. We are unable to have that level of discussion at this point, and if this was a real project that we were actively designing, we would have more and better information and more details to give you. But we do want the conversation. This is a long process to do the project development for a project. And in the past, we've run into problems where we didn't take into consideration the big picture stuff, where we went out and resurfaced and then we had some regrets. So this is really just a starting conversation about the 3 different concepts that we at MassDOT in the transportation industry are looking to advance to more of a multimodal. All users are being considered when we redistribute or reevaluate how to redistribute the available right away. There's an awful lot of, call it informal parking out there. We know that that's going to be an issue going down the road, but for this particular effort, we're trying to get feedback on shared use path. Do we want a shared use path on this side, on the opposite side? Do we want bike lanes? How's that? In the big picture, we're looking at the larger concepts and the difference between them. We will have the engineers get into those details in those types of questions. But if there's specific questions about your property, we really don't have a project, if you will, that we're actively designing and advancing. There isn't any construction funding for any of these concepts or projects. We're here just to show you what we're looking at now that we're looking at this roadway. How do we better accommodate all users? And this is our first take. And we're asking for your input. And that's, I guess what I'd like to do is, we have a slideshow presentation that we'd like to take you through. If you could hold off on any comments or questions until the end. During the Q&A, when we come back, we'll be able to put up on the screen any particular cross-section if you want to talk about concept A, B, or C, or if you want to speak to whatever your issues are. We'll certainly try to address those, but we can always go back in the PowerPoint presentation if you have a specific question. And with that, I'd like to introduce Jacobs, who is our consultant that we've hired. They've been out here doing survey over the winter and was just starting to put together some preliminary drainage information. We still have some work to do on the drainage assessment, but those are 2 areas that we're advancing full steam, because we need to know what's going on with the roadway, with the right-of-way, and with the drainage. Those are the 3 things that I'm looking at actively right now, but we do want to start this conversation with what, if we are going to do something, what is it that we like or don't like in these 3 concepts are where we'll start with. And, I'll turn it over to Patrick Crowley from Jacobs.
All right, good evening. My name's Patrick Crowley. I'm the project manager for Jacobs. Jacobs was hired by the DOT to do the preliminary engineering and develop concepts for North End Boulevard. I'll skip over the first couple of slides because it just talks about Neil and Frank's role in the project. So the town of Salisbury is the project proponent, and along with MassDOT, but MassDOT is responsible for administrating the design, and Jacobs is responsible for delivering the design for MassDOT. Jacobs is currently under contract with MassDOT to provide design services to improve the existing drainage systems, improve the overall safety of the roadway corridor by incorporating complete street elements, improving the intersection of Central Ave and North End Boulevard, and improving the ADA accessibility along the whole stretch of roadway and at all roadway crossings. In addition to that, we're also looking to provide enhanced pedestrian and bicycle accommodations along North End Boulevard. So our project limit begins at the intersection of Beach Road, and it extends north to the state line. So that red line that you see on the graphic here represents our length of project. So why is the project needed? The project is needed to address several deficiencies. Currently, the existing drainage system has difficulty handling the larger storm events, and the runoff from the roadway surface is not controlled and has a tendency to flow off onto the adjacent properties. Another reason for the project is to improve the overall safety of the corridor by incorporating complete street elements into the design to enable safe access for all users, including bicyclists, pedestrians, and motorists. And as mentioned before, one of the reasons for the project is to improve the geometry of the intersection of Central Ave and North End Boulevard. Some of the issues within the roadway corridor, as previously mentioned, deals with the poor drainage system and the intersection of Central Ave. In addition to that, the pavement condition along this road is beginning to fail. It's uneven and has pavement rutting along with cracking. The roadway currently lacks proper pedestrian accommodations along the whole length of the road and also lacks ADA compliant wheelchair ramps. And the roadway also lacks bicycle accommodations, who are currently forced to share the roadway with motorists, which can be uncomfortable for the cyclist, especially for beginner cyclists and children. Going to run through a couple of photos. The photo on the left here is an example, or represents, or shows, I should say, the Central Ave and North End Boulevard intersection. It's a large opening which is not currently striped. It creates safety issues, increases the potential. You can't hear me? All right, sorry. What's that? All right, sorry about that. The large opening, which is not currently striped, creates safety issues, increases the likelihood of a potential crash or conflict. Also, if you look at the picture, there's a crosswalk leading pedestrians to what is now an existing parking lot, and there's no access to the other side of Central Ave. Sorry, guys. Sorry. Having trouble with the No, I'm sorry. It's getting caught up. I had other. The photo on the right shows the current parking condition, that vehicles parking perpendicular to their homes. A lot of times you'll see vehicles that are extending or encroaching into the travel lane. I feel like I'm missing. Project goals. So the project goals that we're trying to deal with is to address the drainage system and the overall safety for all users while improving proper accommodations for pedestrians and bicyclists and minimizing any impacts outside the right-of-way. We've currently developed 3 different concepts, concepts A, B, and C, which were laid out on the back table. Concept A, we're calling bike lanes. Concept B has a 2-way separated bike lane, and concept C has a shared use path. This is a typical cross-section for concept A. If you're moving left or right along the typical, we're showing a 5-foot sidewalk. The back of sidewalk maintains the existing walkway on the western side of the road with a vertical curb, which would align with in the approximate location of today's existing curb. After that, we have a 7-foot shoulder separated from a bike path with a 2-foot painted buffer, northbound and southbound travel lanes in both directions, and then another bike lane going northbound. This is the existing condition of the road today. Here the image shows a bike or a sidewalk on the left-hand side with a crosswalk. At the crosswalk, we're showing a bump out for enhanced safety for pedestrians, increases the visibility for pedestrians trying to cross the road. We have you see the northbound and southbound bike lanes adjacent to the travel lanes, and the southbound bike lane is separated from the shoulder with a 2-foot painted buffer. The green marking there represents a bike crossing. Concept B, this is a 2-way separated bike lane. Again, we're showing a 5-foot sidewalk on the left-hand side with a vertical curb. We have a bike lane that runs in both directions along the western edge of the road. That shared bike lane, or 2-way bike lane, is separated from the shoulder by a 2-foot painted buffer, and there would be a northbound, southbound travel lane. On all the concepts I'm going through tonight, there is a mountable berm on the eastern side of the road. This berm was placed there to improve drainage while still being mountable for residents to drive into their driveways. Again, an existing cross-section or image of the roadway. We're showing the 2-foot or the northbound and southbound travel lanes. Here you can see the 2-way bike lane that was placed along the western edge. There would be, at the crossings, islands that separate the bike lanes in the shoulder for enhanced protection for the pedestrians trying to cross. And there would also be a 2-foot painted buffer. Concept C, we're referring to as the shared use path. This path is a 10 to 12 foot wide path along the western side of the road. It's a shared space where both pedestrians and bicyclists would utilize. That shared path is separated from the shoulder by a 5-foot landscaped or grass buffer. There will be vertical granite curbing on the left-hand side or the western side of the road with a 7-foot striped shoulder and a northbound and southbound travel lane. Again, this concept also maintains or would propose a mountable berm on the eastern side of the road. Here we can see the 2 travel lanes for northbound and southbound direction. 2 wheelchair ramps on either side of the crosswalk. The shared use path is on the left-hand side, and it's separated by from the curving with that 5-foot grass buffer. So currently, as we still work through our concepts, we're looking at continuing assessing the drainage condition, and we're finalizing our base mapping and survey, which took place last year, and there's some additional information that we're gathering at this point. And we're assessing any right-of-way impacts that would be caused by any of our designs. I provided a contact information of Frank Szynski at District 4 for any comments or questions you might have on any of the concepts that were shown. And we can open it up to any questions or concerns or anything that you would like to hear about any of the concepts that we showed. You want to go back to the up? So we didn't, you want to go into parking? We didn't. Okay. So Neil just brought up an important point that he wanted to discuss on the parking. So for each of the concepts that we showed, and I'll go back to the typicals real quick. We're not showing or identifying any parking zone within this cross-section. What we did is we identified the 7-foot shoulder, which would be wide enough for parking, the parallel parking on the western side. And the purpose on the eastern side would be the mountable berm that would still allow access perpendicular to the road and into people's driveways. We've done a preliminary parking study analysis to kind of gauge what the impacts would be for each of the concepts. Let me just grab the numbers real quick. And these numbers are just preliminary and they have to be confirmed. But for concept A, we would anticipate losing approximately 12% of the parking along this roadway. Most of the issues deal with the eastern side by having 2 separate bike lanes. It's a wider cross-section, and we seem to encroach more to the eastern side, so some of the cars that are parking perpendicular would be impacted. With this concept, looking at the numbers, the amount of impact is around 5%. Most of these impacts are due to the bump outs that are created at the crosswalks. You want a desired setback distance from crosswalks so that pedestrians, it's a safety enhancement so that pedestrians are easily visible to the motorist trying to cross the road. And also at the intersections, having a setback of 10 to 20 feet for cars to be able to exit the side streets is necessary. And on the concept C, we're losing about 7 to 8% of the parking. Again, mostly due to the bump outs and some of the perpendicular parking that occurs. Some of it now is right on the pavement line or encroaches into the travelway. And those would likely be impacted with this concept.
If I can just add on to that, any one of those concepts is going to impact how people are using the shoulders of the roadway or their property, in that I don't want the fact that there's parking, to override the loss of parking or perceived loss of parking to cloud what we're actually trying to do and look for the big picture project and see if that's something that people want. We understand that there's a lot of informal parking out there. There's no effort to change any of that as it's being used right now. It's something that we obviously have to look at because there's impacts to whatever project we do decide to advance, but we're not going to advance a project of this significance if we don't have the local support. And if we don't have the local support, that's part of this process, and we're just starting that process. So there is informal parking out there. What we're trying to do is be context sensitive. We know that the parking on the east side is people pushing into their property and maybe extending back in. On the left-hand side, you have people parking in the shoulder. There was about 150 cars here today, this afternoon, parallel parked in that shoulder. We're calling it a usable shoulder. We're maintaining a 7-foot usable shoulder in these concepts. If you can read between the lines, our goal isn't to sabotage or stop any progress on having this dialogue. But yes, parking is going to be impacted. But the concepts that we're showing should show you that we're at least aware of that, and we're trying to minimize how much of that, but we're also trying to deliver a bigger improvement for the bikes and peds and how the corridor is used. So we really want to keep our focus on the big picture And yes, there's going to be parking changes for anyone, for any project, even if we don't even build these three. If we're going to use state and federal dollars, these are the things that we look at. And tonight is our first opportunity to present these three concepts, how we see it in what the industry and in the stakeholders who are promoting healthy transportation in our policies, you know, dictate that we look at all users, and this is what we see, and we want you to give us your feedback, what you like it, don't like it, and if you want to say, I don't want to lose my parking spot, I don't know where your parking spot is, I don't think it's a legal parking spot, but we shouldn't be dealing in that at this level. It's more about how do we want to do a project and what would that project look like, and this is starting the conversation tonight.
Let me just add a little bit more, if I might, because town officials were briefed on a little bit more of the detail when we had a meeting a short while ago. And just to give some rough numbers based on the survey work that the engineers was referring to, there are approximately, I stress the word approximately, 457 total parking spaces on North End Boulevard, both sides. There are three options here that have been described by the engineer. Option A would result at this stage of the discussion, again, very preliminary, in a net loss of approximately 83 spaces. Option B, 59 spaces. Option C, 65 spaces, 41 of which would be the perpendicular people backing the back ends out into rear ends, out into North End Boulevard, and also the Central Ave right-of-way where people are actually parking in the right-of-way. So in the three concepts here, in order to meet all of the goals that Patrick was talking about in terms of safety for pedestrians, safety for bicyclists, roadway safety in terms of the width of the right-of-way and how fast people are going and things like that, there's going to need to be some recognition of the fact that the existing conditions cannot continue because it will just continue to be dangerous all the way around. So none of these concepts comes with a perfect solution relative to the parking. And as Frank was alluding to, the engineer's goal is to make the roadway safe. Their engineer's goal is not to consider whether, if you live at 123 North End Boulevard, whether your individual parking space is going to be preserved. That's not. This is the eagle's eye view from the engineer's point of view, looking down on this project. They're not looking at individual parking spaces at this point, but the numbers that I referenced to you are in roughly the estimates that are currently under consideration. Lots of things can change depending upon public input, depending upon lots of what could happen between now and when a project could potentially get designed. But just so people have some rough, again, I stress very rough numbers to look at. That's the total parking picture as we see it right now preliminarily on North End Boulevard with these three plans. So at this point, I'd like to open it up to comments and questions from the public. I'd kindly ask you, again, to step to the microphone. Be careful as you're walking up. There's some cords that run under the matting here, and if you could just come up this side and enter on this side and speak at the microphone. We can go back to any of the concepts you wish. Are people clear on what the concepts are, the three different concepts? Do we need to outline that again? If not, people have comments or questions, please come forward and start. Tom?
Thank you, Neil. So first question I have is it absolutely a requirement that the bike lanes are installed or else it will not get repaved. Is that correct?
As part of our healthy transportation policy, every project that goes through our project development process, we look at all the users and how we want to, what improvements that we want to make. we look at the project needs first, and then we decide. But yes, we have a healthy transportation policy that requires all roadways to have a minimum of a 5-foot bike lane and sidewalks on both sides.
So obviously, there wouldn't be a sidewalk on both sides in this case, correct?
Correct, and if we can't meet those minimums that I stated as far as a 5-foot bike lane and sidewalks on both sides, we have to provide justification for that. So as part of that process, this public process, this gets documented. We'll be having many more meetings, but once we have all the information that we have to provide justification for not providing that minimum standard. And it's only a minimum standard that's stated. We actually are trying to achieve the maximum extent benefit for all users, and we look at that. So that minimum bar is a minimum. Below that, we have to justify it. Above that is what we're shooting for.
So again, the bottom line is that it would not get paved if you don't provide those bike lanes. Correct. So the next thing is that obviously, knowing North End Boulevard as we know it, being there 45 years, and many people have been there as long as I have, if not longer, the safety, if you have to have bike lines for safety purposes, obviously number 3, concept 3 would be your best choice for safety, regardless of the width of the shoulders, for safety purposes, and a few of us were just looking at the plan before the meeting began. It's obvious. Is that what you're leaning towards for safety purposes? Not at all. Not towards any of them. So just my observation, or our observation from a number of us, is that safety, if you have to have bicycle paths, number 3 is going to protect the bikers. The other thing is, obviously, as you emphasize, you're not trying to hurt the parking issue, especially on the east side. The truth is that there are obviously many homes that have no parking that go with their property. Some have 1 parking, some are fortunate to have 2, there's a few that have more. Once we eliminate parking on the east side, property values will drop. And some have dropped already for people who try to resell that don't have parking or limited parking, because it's, as Salisbury Beach, as we all know, is a family beach. The people visit, they have their aunts and uncles and their grandparents and children, and everybody is looking for a parking spot here or there to accommodate everyone. If you start to restrict the visitors coming to the beach, property owners, property values drop, people will not be able to sell for the price they need to get. As the property values drop at Salisbury Beach, the tax dollars coming into the town drop, and that means the tax dollars coming from the town area go up. As you all know, we pay 41% of the taxes for the entire town come from Salisbury Beach. So if we start losing parking and restricting parking, then the values of the properties go down and the taxes for the town residents start to go up. So we really need to take that into consideration as we go forward with the discussion. Again, this is just the beginning, as Neil has emphasized, and we actually, personally, I really appreciate Neil putting this together and being able to see what is taking place. But safety is important, proper travel is important, but believe me, for the values of the properties and the values to the town of Salisbury, parking is extremely, extremely important. The only last thing is I saw in concept 3, a 5-foot area for planting grass. Have you spoken to conservation yet? Because they don't allow planting of grass.
Thank you, Tom. Again, not to speak for Frank or the engineers, but their goal is not to create a parking burden for people, but there is, let's all not kid ourselves, there is a haphazard parking situation on North End Boulevard. It creates dangers, and we'd like to create a scenario that's safer for everyone, the people who have a place to park, the people who don't have a place to park and need to find a place to park, and pedestrians and cyclists and people with disabilities. So the goal is not to overburden the parking situation by eliminating parking, but there is no alternative in which some parking will not have to be sacrificed. Where that is and how many will have to work itself out during the course of the project, and as I mentioned, each of these alternatives will have a different impact relative to parking, but it should come as no surprise to anybody here that there are people that are parking in areas that they should not be parking in because it's not safe, and if there's a way to deal with that, we're hopeful that the engineers and their wisdom will be able to tweak the plan so that we can preserve the maximum number of parking spaces. Again, I won't speak for the selectmen, but when we met to have this plan explained to us a little while ago, the same concerns were expressed by members of the Board of Selectmen. They're very, very cognizant of the fact that people value their parking at the beach, and as Tom said, some people don't even have any legal parking spaces, and they just do what they have to do. So there shouldn't be any surprises here in terms of the parking situation. We're just trying to minimize whatever impact that we can on parking while looking at the overall goal of improving the roadway and making it a much safer place for all users, as was mentioned. All right, no more speaking for me. Yes, Ray. Oh, I'm sorry. I asked you to come up on this side, and I didn't look on that side. Okay, please, come on up. Sorry. That's okay.
Good evening. After watching the presentation and looking at the plans in the back, and I realize safety is a big issue, but my question is, if you're thinking about safety and parking, why wasn't Central Ave included in this project?
Well, Central Ave specifically isn't in the project or out of the project. We certainly considered doing some improvements there. I'm not sure if that's a local street, but as part of the advancement of this project, we certainly look at that. We're trying to get people to see some of the redistribution of the right-of-way for the three different concepts. How the detailing of that is when we get more into the engineering and fine-tuning what the concepts are.
So do you think Central Avenue at some point in time?
We're gonna, the way it comes into North End Boulevard, we're gonna change the entrance and exit so that they're more of a 90-degree and they're under the stop control. So we are going to address how that interface with North End Boulevard as far as going up there and doing other work. We'll certainly consider that. But really the way cars exit and enter North End Boulevard, we would rework those two intersections.
Sure. When money is allocated for this project,
Yep.
I hope you would consider some of the issues on Central Avenue.
Sure. We want everything, you know, everything's getting put on the table, and we're trying to, you know, hear what your needs are so we can better address those.
Yeah, just if I might add to that briefly, if you meant by your question, is there a possibility that all of Central Ave will be redone as a portion of this project? The answer is no. But the intersection certainly, and as Frank said, if there are other adjoining issues that play into this, absolutely. Thank you. Yes, sir.
Thank you. I've owned property up on North End Boulevard. I've owned property on the side streets. I currently live at 11th Street. Some of the concerns that we have, my wife particularly, she's a marathon runner. She runs out, she goes east, she has to take a left or a right, she has to go south and north. She has to run on the street. 90% of the time, the sidewalks are parked on top of. You can call, complain, do whatever. The police department's overwhelmed. The number of calls that they get. There was an accident tonight at Liberty Street. Somebody pulling out got hit. So the existing program doesn't work. It needs to be addressed. And I applaud them for at least taking a look at this and coming up with 3 existing contracts. I'm not sure how long this is going to take before it actually gets implemented. I look forward to hearing more information about that. We recently, as a town, created a new commercial section. Basically goes down to where Central Ave joins in, slightly further than that to the north. We have 3 parking lots at the reservation. We have a town parking lot. We have state road parking. The problem with the parking on the south end is that everybody that parks nose in, and it abstracts out, hangs out into the travel lane. The methods that they have in place are taking out limited number of parking spots in consideration compared to what we have, and it's going to make things safer. Right now, you have bikers on the road because they can't ride on the side. You have runners in the road because they can't run on the sidewalk. You have all these people that are having these problems. We pay an enormous amount of property taxes, like Mr. Saab said, 41% of the budget comes from the town, from the beach. I disagree with Mr. Saab in regards to the property values. I think that property values would actually increase if you didn't have all these parking nightmares and you didn't have all this, all the rental properties. I think it would be more of an exclusive beach at that point in time. You do have a public section that you do drive business from. Just to think of the fact that with the commercial, by funneling the people, I was a day tripper. When I was a kid, I grew up in Lawrence. I've been coming here for 50 years. We'd come in, we might go down to Markey's, we might go to Brown's, we might go to the reservation, or not to the reservation, go to the Broadway area once, twice a year as a day tripper. You turn around, you leave. You're looking for free parking day at the beach. The people that are actually being funneled into the appropriate areas, the commercial areas, they're going to spend money. And by spending money, the town reaps the benefit of the 0.75 tax for all the food sales that go on down at the town. It also creates sales tax for the state. It generates parking income from the state lot fees. We should be pushing day trippers to the Broadway area and the reservation. That's the commercial section of the beach. That's what we should be doing. The safety aspects are, you get 1 to 2 pedestrians clipped a year. Part of that problem is the fact that people walk out from behind vans, cars, vehicles, don't see what's coming. They think they're in the crosswalk, they think they're in the right, and they are. But if you can't see them, you can't stop for them. So it's nice to see that you have something up there that might actually address the safety concerns. The fact that it's 40 miles an hour, that is a safety concern. This is not a 40-mile-an-hour road in the summer. It needs to be addressed, but unfortunately that's going to be a state legislative address. It has to be addressed at the state level because all state highways are mandated by density. Big thing is the curb paintings. I'd like to see the curbs. People are out there, they're painting their own curbs. They're painting curbs that don't belong being painted. You get people painting lines for vertical parking that go right out to the fog lines. Well, if you're going right out to the fog lines, there's no sidewalk. And on the east side, on the west side of the beach, that is the only sidewalk. That is the only method to be able to run. It's the only method for people to be able to bike ride. And at this point in time, you can't do it safely because people are backed out right up to the fog line right now. So those are some of the concerns that my family would like to see addressed. I'm looking forward to hearing what the town has going forward.
Thank you. Everybody's over here. Great. Next, thank you.
Thanks. Hi, Rick Rigoli. I'm on North End Boulevard. Most of my questions were related to the berms. All 3 plans looked like it had a berm on the east side of the street, and I think they were the same in all plans. Could you help me visualize where that berm would be vis-a-vis the existing storm drains that are there? Would those storm drains be moved more westward or more eastward? And that's my first part of my question. And the second part of my question on the berms would be, once they're there, I think they're a great idea, but they look like they would be like speed bumps. And are they going to end up being plowed into my driveway when the state comes by or my private plow guy comes by in the winter?
To answer your first question, we would be placing new catch basins along that edge of the berm. So any inlet or structure that is currently behind, we would relocate so that all the collection would occur within that gutter line. To answer your second question, as far as plowing the berm, we would do some reconstruction beyond the limit of the berm within the right-of-way that would create a level surface from the top of the berm to meet existing, while still providing drainage towards the road. So that would alleviate any concerns of the berm actually being plowed or moved. It's not going to be a berm that's just protruding or just above the surface. It's going to become integral to the finished grade of the road and the space behind the berm itself. So, sure. The berm that we're talking about is this little piece of asphalt right here. It's about 2 inches high and anywhere from 1 to 2 feet wide. And the whole purpose really is to create an edge for the drainage to be controlled and prevent or promote positive drainage towards the inlet and not the yards of the residents.
Amy? What's that? Put it on here? Okay. Just have to speak.
Thank you so much. Okay. Hi. So,
You have to speak into the microphone.
okay. Actually, I live on Liberty Street, and I was unaware of that accident that happened this evening. But late afternoon, when I was coming home, heading south on North End Boulevard, there was a motorcyclist laying on the ground, so there was another accident. I was very naive when I moved here in 2007. As a summer home, I went down to the police department, and I wanted to speak to them about the speed limit, because I could not imagine that cars were going 40 miles per hour down the street. And I was told that it was a state road, so I quickly became aware that the town could not do anything about the speed. I appreciate Tom Saab's efforts for Salisbury Beach, but as far as property values compared to the value of a human life, to me, there is no comparison. So I myself am a runner, and I leave Liberty Street and I head north on North End Boulevard on the sidewalk, which is actually up and down, not good. And then I go out, and when I come back, because as a runner, you know you're supposed to go against the traffic. Coming back, those cars that are parked perpendicular, I have to say, we have had some close calls. And with my husband, I'm like, you have to watch. If there's a person in that driver's seat, you have to look for the backup lights, because we almost got backed over, because they're all stacked perpendicular. I'm not sure which concept is best. Another issue is a shared bike lane with pedestrians, bicyclists and pedestrians. I don't know how well those would mix, so that would be a concern I would have also. There was just down towards Boston on a bikeway, a fatality, and it was 2 bikes that collided. Both had helmets on, and a 70-year-old woman died on a bike path. So there's all safety concerns, and I think that that should be considered, the bikes with the pedestrians or the runners, but something has to be done. It's just not safe. And then just one last thing, if the state is in charge of this road, I would love to see the state take care of the trash removal that the people are leaving at the end of their day. Because I go out and I fill up bags of trash that I have to pay to have picked up. It's horrible. Diapers, Dunkin' Donuts. Hey, a Tripoli box of 8. Well, we ate it, so we're just going to dump the box. So if it is state mandated, state property, you need to do something about the trash. Thank you.
Ray Champagne. I'm the president of the Salisbury Beach Betterment Association. Our concerns, of course, is crosswalks, safety. We highly appreciate Neil's efforts as well as the state's effort. Recently, without much consideration that we saw, was the improvement that was done to Beach Road. Now, that's a state highway. None of us got notified. I happen to own a business on Beach Road. It was like a last-minute decision, Frank. I'm assuming that you were in charge of that. There are manholes that are sticking up too high from the paving. I know a few plow drivers that have had incidents down there. So supervision of the contractors that are involved in doing the work, I think is very important, so that we don't end up with wrong-sized berms. The other thing that I agree with that young lady that just spoke about Plan C with bicycles. I don't think that this project right here, because we have people walking with children pushing carriages, there are multiple people side by side. We have bike people, and I do see a lot of that activity recently. There's much more biking going on. I think separate lanes. I was under the impression that you were supposed to go with the flow, not against the flow, and I realize that we see it up on a sidewalk. I'm not sure that that would be the best for the pedestrian. Like the lady pointed out with the garbage cans, that might be up on that sidewalk as well. The paving, the drainage is quite a bit of a problem recently, because all of the entrances from the side streets now are collecting water. I happen to have a little photo for you that you can put in your folder that shows, I live on a corner, not the corner, but near Beacon Street, and the water accumulates there and freezes. So when we're exiting Beacon Street to North End Boulevard, we slide right out into the main 40-mile-an-hour traffic. And it's not the only street, but there's a photo that shows standing water throughout the winter. And DOT had a crew out there, I want to say 4 or 5 years ago, trying to correct it, but they elevated the basin higher than the drainage. So there needs to be a lot of consideration considered. I don't know if there's a temporary fix. The manholes on North End Boulevard, we call that our new Salisbury Beach roller coaster. As we go down it, 40 miles an hour is an excessive speed. I can tell you that my association just donated a speed trap sign, which is now mounted up on North End Boulevard, that the police department is maintaining, so that we can try to find out if indeed the state needs to reconsider the speed of 40 miles an hour on that road. So with that said, I appreciate everything that's trying to be done, and hopefully what will be done will be good for everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Ray. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, I'm Sharon Joyce, and I live on 5th Street West, which is the North Boulevard. And I want to reiterate what the gentleman said about the parking with day trippers. I kind of question whether the 457 parking that was taken up are all residents and their visitors, or are they day trippers? I can honestly say down our end, I would venture to say we have at least 30 cars that are out there that are people who come for the day and leave. The issues we have in our street is we can hardly get out of our street because they park right to the corner. There are people in this building right now who have mailboxes there, and they can hardly get their mail because somebody will park in front of their mailbox. I also believe that 40 miles per hour, which I know you have no control over, is very dangerous. Inevitably, I would say, and I've been there for 28 years, out of 28 years, at least 3 to 4 times a week when I try to cross over in the crosswalk, and I go out and I wait till they stop here. I go out middle way and somebody will go this way. Or if I'm stopped and someone stops for me and I wait for both to stop, because actually people have been rear-ended because of the speed, someone has actually gone behind me to go ahead. And at our end, because the road is a little better, they do travel at 40 miles an hour. Now, I don't know whether or not we're able to get permits. So the people who don't have parking, the residents, could have permits for themselves and for their company. And day trippers could, in fact, go to the center. It would generate money for us, pay for the parking, Because I pay for parking at my house because I pay for my taxes. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you. Lou?
Well, first, I'd like to thank DOT for taking this project on. It's been a long time coming. I personally appreciate it, and I think everybody here does as well. And Neil for calling this meeting. Nobody can question the need for safety. That's, no question about it. But let's not forget parking. It is important to a lot of people. I am one of those folks who does not have deeded parking. And I'm not quite clear from the alternatives I've heard if I will still be able to park perpendicular or at an angle in front of my house on the east side. I think I will, and I'd like that point clarified. Will there be sufficient space with that raised berm to park on the east side perpendicular to the properties? Those properties that abut the state highway.
Yeah, I would, in looking at the cross-section where the berm is, this is the existing edge of pavement, so we're coming in at least 5 more feet. I don't know what this is. This could be your front yard, the way you're parking. This that's the 60-foot right-of-way that's available, that's state highway. We're trying to keep our footprint into this 45 feet and maximize how much area is left over here based on the existing use that is unformalized, but where we have the 7-foot shoulder, that should say shoulder. It doesn't say parking, close your eyes, that says shoulder. Right. That's a 7-foot shoulder, if that's available.
Okay. Thank you. It looks like to me on the east side, you've got 10 plus about 5, about 50, right? 5, yeah. About, it's not really 7. It's about 7 or 8, 10 in some places, plus 5. So 12 to 15 feet of parking there. I think the other thing I'd like to say is on this shared lane for pedestrians and bikers, Ray, I have seen this in other places and it does work. Everybody has to just be a little aware that you're sharing it with somebody. Our current bike trails are shared by people with baby carriages, walkers, and bikers, so that can work. Yeah, and you can see it could fit 3 bikers there as well as a pedestrian. So I think it'd work. The thing that, again, concerns me most is 2 things. Losing parking, and if we retain something like that, I guess I'll have to buy a smaller car, but I can park. The other thing, I think, is that you got to do something to slow down the traffic. The bump outs, I think that's what I call them anyway, at the crosswalks is a great idea. The public access crosswalks, and I think also the speed limit. Somebody mentioned that, I think, and I think we should have a summer speed limit of 25 miles an hour, and the rest of the year, 30 miles an hour. Right now, that's as fast as you can go anyway without breaking your shock absorbers or something. But it should be that year-round, I think, and that'll solve a lot of the problems, I believe. So, I think also, I agree with Mr. Saab about the economic impact of whatever you do, because when we talk about eliminating any parking on the east side, and you're going to eliminate some, we all agree with that, but whenever you reduce parking on either the east or the west side, you're going to eliminate renters. The town now has a tax on short-term rentals. Less revenue coming into town from that. And the day trippers, let's not look at them as outsiders. This is their beach. They pay the taxes that support it. They all own it. We all own it equally. It's a public beach. They have a right to park. If nobody has a right to park on the west side or the east side, one thing, okay? Thank God we can park on the west and east to some degree. But those people that come up from any place other than Salisbury for 2 or 3 hours or a day on the beach have an equal right to use that space. So we've got to work around that. We've got to all share it. But I just hope whatever you end up with, you minimize the parking you're going to take on both sides, and particularly on the east, because that's the one where you have most of the properties that don't have deeded parking. Thank you.
Thank you.
I just wanted to add a couple of things. I heard a couple of people say about the speeds, and we agree. One of the things that does address the speed in some of these options will be more defining of the pavement markings that we use for the roads. The bump outs and the crosswalks will be in concrete, so just narrowing the lane and painting it for 11 feet is going to slow vehicles down to some extent. The speed limit is 40 out there, but we are aware of that, and we'll certainly look at ways of combating that. Once we have a project and we know how we're advancing, then we'll certainly be looking at those elements to do any kind of traffic calming that we can do during the development of that process. But there is going to be some built-in reduction of speed for either of these options just because of the presence of being more things are going on. Your sight lines are going to be able to see more things happening. So that's what we've been the case in the past with projects like this.
If I could add to that, speaking from a non-engineering point of view, I believe I heard Frank or Patrick or somebody say earlier that the current right-of-way there is quite wide and the current travel lanes are quite wide, which does encourage speeding. And in all of these concepts, unless I'm mistaken, you're going to narrow the travel lanes, correct? So that in and of itself, it's not a panacea to everything, but that in and of itself will help, correct? Okay. Yes, ma'am. Oh, what happened? Oh, yeah, one's ours.
Hi, thank you for the presentation. I'm Donna Keefe. I live on 67 North End Boulevard. I've heard several comments on Concept C, and as I've reviewed and looked at all your options, Concept C is one that I don't favor for what many people have said about the shared use, because I've seen many disasters with kids, dogs, bikes, sidewalks with skateboards, bicyclists. It doesn't seem to work for everybody, and the travel on North End Boulevard, when you see cyclists going up and down there all the time, they don't ride like they're on a bike path or so. It's really a road, and people do go quickly and faster. And actually, that one offers even, less parking on C than B or A. Well, A eliminates more, but B would eliminate less. I think A, when you ride on 2 with the traffic and that road on both lanes, and because it's narrow, people do tend to have to ride single file, which is more safer for that one stretch than if people spread out and the pedestrians are kept separate. B, I'm not sure how it would be divided between pedestrians and cyclists, but at least a two-way cyclist with pedestrians on one side would probably work as well if needed. I can't quite tell, I'm not sure on the concepts looking at them, if the parking was on one side and then the pedestrians and cyclists were on the other side of the road, which seems to be a better for safety and not getting doored by cars and pulling in and out. I can't quite tell if all of them are showing that, but just the idea of having them separated would be helpful. Excuse me, I gotta find my, let me see what else. Well, anyway, okay, I am going to reiterate, I think trash cans and cleaning up that road would be very nice too. And I think looking at parking and the reconstruction of this, I'm really glad to see that the drainage and safety is getting addressed, because it is really bad, and the conditions of the road, as we all know. So we don't need to keep saying that, but I thought actually it was on the books to get done and funded. I didn't realize it was still out there. I thought this was going to get done, in the next year or two. But regardless of that, I think it is time to get it done, so I hope we will. And I also like that there is parking along North End Boulevard, because one of the things I really appreciate about this beach and being here is that it's accessible to people to come from. You don't have to just have a beach house and parking. And I think all that accessibility, it would be nice to maintain as much parking as possible, with the considerations of, other issues around parking. And it would be helpful once this is well, I'm sure that when the project is done, that the parking will have lines and there'll be better monitoring for illegal parking on curbs, overstretching roads and everything else. So I think with that all done together, it will make a big improvement and address multiple needs. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Yes, sir.
Hi, I'm Steve Rossetti. I live on Lewis Ave, Salisbury. My first question is it's a compliment, thank you. I think all three plans seem to me to be pretty workable. Current situation is terrible. I don't care which one you do, just got to do one. But I would like to comment. I know you talked about drainage, and right now, you go from 10th Street, 11th Street, 12th Street, Lewis Ave, Florence Ave. There is currently a deplorable drainage problem there. Now, I don't know if that is part of what's going to be corrected with this road. It doesn't drain at all. Middle of the winter time, you slip and slide trying to get in and out of that street. I don't know, and I guess that's the question I'm asking here, is that part of the fixing the problem, or is that going to go on? I mean, that was discovered about 2 or 3 years ago when Charter built the flood wall. They found the drain that wasn't working, and it's been that long, and it's still happening, and I haven't got an answer from anyone as to whether it was ever going to be fixed or not.
So for the drainage, we're going to do an assessment for 1A. We're going to look at that. Lewis Ave, I believe there's a drain manhole at Northern Boulevard that goes out to the seawall. We're working on that. So that's considered our drainage system, and that's part of one of the efforts that we're doing. With the drainage assessment in the right-of-way is there are some outfalls that the pipes come off the state highway and outlet either through private property or through to the seawall. They go down Lewis Ave. So that drainage system I would look at and assess that. If there's local drainage on that local street, it's not part of the project, but we can certainly work with the town and add in items as non-participating to enhance whatever we do find, but we are doing an assessment for the state system, which includes all of 1A in any kind of crossings that outlets. We're trying to get those permitted properly and documented in the right-of-way plans. So that's an effort that's ongoing as we speak, and we'll continue to. But we'll look at the drainage in more detail as we get going.
It's terrible. Just one last comment. As a cyclist, a long-distance cyclist, the mixed-use path is definitely not the safest. The option C, the mixed-use path, is definitely not the safest. I can tell you from personal experience going to places, it's like a bike path, and there's a lot of people on it. Someone's not paying attention, ended up in a ditch in Florida, just very similar to that, because someone was walking the dog, not paying attention, and they had a leash, and the dog saw something, ran right out in front of me. Down the ditch I went, and it's not the safest, believe me. It's workable, but it's not the safest. Okay.
Thank you. I appreciate that insight. Yes, Mr. McCowitz.
Mine is just a question. Working on roads for a long time as I had, on my knowledge or my experience is that on state-numbered routes, also maintained by the state, there's no parking anywhere in the state on these by state law. Am I not correct? Thank you, that's all I want to know.
Yes, you are technically correct. Yes, sir.
Good evening. Thank you, State, for coming by, and the local city of town officials. I appreciate you attending because there are also local issues that need to be addressed in regards to this same plan. I'm jealous of a lot of you because you say that there's 40-mile-per-hour driving in your area. Well, I'm in the area from Beach Road to Central, and it's a drag path. 50 miles per hour. The workers that were driving the industrial trucks for paving a beach road, 50 miles per hour, bouncing by the house, not appropriate. 40 miles per hour is too fast. 50 is way too fast, obviously. And if you're a biker in this mixed-use path, I don't understand how you're avoiding the mailboxes. Everybody has a mailbox on that side. The post office doesn't allow for us to have them on the east side. They don't want us to have them there because it's easier for their trucks to deliver them there without having to turn around. I have a postal worker in the family, so I'm familiar with the issue. When I was putting up my mailbox and wondering why I can't get it on my side of the road. They have their reasons that are not addressed. Some people get them, some people don't. And I'll tell you, I've seen bikers, they travel faster than cars. I don't know how anybody, myself, I have young children, how are we gonna walk our children and enjoy the walk with somebody breezing by? It's not gonna happen. It's not safe, and it really is a poor concept of having people all together. The bikers aren't around all the time. I agree with that completely, but the runners are, the walkers are, and I know people want seasonal speeds on the road. My children go to school here. I'm considering putting my child on a bus, and that's on North End Boulevard. Every single morning, the cars are driving 50 miles per hour by my house because they're commuting from New Hampshire to Newburyport, New Hampshire to another area, or even from our own community, and shame on you if you're driving fast. It's embarrassing. People leave trash all the time as they're parking across the area from 23 to 61 North End Boulevard. It's recessed, the sidewalk is invisible. This year, the state did come by and reclaim 50% of the sidewalk. Who knew it was there? We get diapers, we get everything from the center. People are out there pre-gaming, they think it's an area to go out and smoke their marijuana, drink beers, and then go over and hang out and come back and yell and scream in front of your house as my now 18-month-old and 8-year-old are in bed, right there. How do we control this? We need help from our town officials, our police departments. They fail to come and monitor the area where they're parked on the sidewalk. I have groups of families, 6, 8 people, all walking in the road. Why? Because somebody wanted their free parking spot. They did their 5, 6, 8-point turn so that they could nuzzle in and maybe hit your mailbox. Maybe they would bump a car in front of them, take up half of the sidewalk. It's not acceptable. We need, the other night, 8, 9, 10 cars out of the 15 cars parked in that area between 23 and 61, all on the sidewalk. I call the police department comes by, 2 cops right away. They're right there, 1 on each end. Incredible. 2 tickets. How is your family gonna walk safely? Some of you may be runners, some of you may be bikers, but we're all civilians, and we all need to be safe. Safety is important.
Thank you. Jim?
I wanted to comment on the parking situation. It was mentioned by a lady earlier about ushering the day trippers down to the municipal lot, and so that triggered an idea that I've had in my mind for some time. Well, first of all, I agree that the residents should have parking passes issued by the town and for themselves and for their guests. But I do not believe that day trippers have any rights to park free. What I would do is I would put up kiosks at the access areas, mark off the parking spots, and charge them a modest fee, and let them pay just like everyone else does that goes to the beach. Tell me another beach where you can park for free, and share the revenue between Department of Transportation and then share it with the Salisbury Beach Preservation Trust to maintain the beach.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, I'm Linda Gwaley. My family has originally owned 15 years on Railroad Avenue and now 58 years in North End Boulevard. So obviously, there's a lot that I know from all the years that have happened here. But I actually have some questions I want to clarify. On your A, B, and C, I'm going to talk just from Central Ave North. Is there parking proposed on the west side of the street, or are you eliminating that completely? That's where I'm not confused. I'm like, you have here, is that still parking?
So we're providing this 7-foot shoulder. In that, we're still carrying this 7-foot shoulder, which is the equivalent of what people are doing on the side of the road now. So.
All right, and then on this side, on this side, the ocean side, you know the white lines? I know it by white lines, not feet. The white lines that go along the ocean front. How much from that white line inward are you taking away?
We're not sure.
I know, because looking at this, I'm sorry, I don't understand.
This is approximately the edge of pavement. This is approximately the edge of pavement, so another 5 feet, if you could visualize that, because that's the best information we have right now. So where we are here is, there's still another 15 feet that's state highway.
Just out of knowing, I don't know about everyone else, but remember that 4 feet you had to go and buy for $10,000 for the railroad or whatever? I don't understand where you're saying there's that much room from the property line to that white line. Okay. Okay. What I want to say is parking is a premium, and I know people are saying how day trippers, a lot of these day trippers are actually visiting people who are there renting. So they're not like just out-of-town people coming arbitrarily and coming to the beach. They're coming to visit people that are already renting or owning in that property. So I hate to say this, I'm kind of hearing this as like derogatory as the day trippers. They're actually people that are important to us, because when they're leaving to go home, they're going to the center to buy pizza or something like that, or whatever. They're bringing a lot of revenue into the town as well. Maybe, yeah, have a small fee for parking. That's a, maybe a good thing. The other thought too is sidewalks going across the street, just to save some parking spaces, if they can put it towards like a corner of a street, like in other words, I'm just saying this arbitrarily, Liberty Street, or what is it, 11th Street? If they can have some of the crosswalks taking some of that corner where you can't park already to make the walk, instead of taking it from a prime parking space along North End Boulevard. There's a walkway going across the street and it goes to the marshes. I mean, who's going across the street to go to the marshes? So if you can move some of these crosswalks, it would be helpful. Parking, I think, is premium. It really is. That's, I mean, I know pedestrians walking, I do, but thank you.
One thing to keep in mind here is, I was just mentioning, asking the engineers, the right-of-way is 60 feet wide. So people are asking, at this point, is there going to be enough room on the east side between what any of these plans might have and for me to park? There is a 60-foot wide right-of-way that needs to accommodate as much of what we're trying to accomplish here as possible. So with all due respect to the engineers, they can't sit here and tell you, am I going to have 5 feet or 10 feet or so much feet in front of my particular house, because at this point we don't know. But just so people just understand, we have a pretty wide right-of-way to accommodate travel lanes, bike lanes, berms, pedestrians, bicyclists, etc. So within that right-of-way, hopefully there's a solution that minimizes the disruption to parking. But there's no way we can guarantee, as Frank said, right now, what's going to happen in front of my house, or do I need to buy a smaller car to park in my space, or whatever. Thank you. Yes.
Hi, I'm Jill Fitzpatrick, and my family has been on North End Boulevard for 100 years, and I appreciate you coming out. I'm just don't understand how people who live on North End Boulevard are going to get to their house with minimal parking. Is the town going to do anything to help the people who actually live there and need to go to the store or go out somewhere with their car or go to work and come home and be able to live at the beach. Would there be town parking on North End Boulevard, like a lot? Or I just can't fathom how we're going to live. The way that this road was built, originally, there were minimal cars. The sidewalk was actually on the beach. That was the east end where people would walk from the center to Seabrook. There was a nice sidewalk there that was unmaintained. Now it's under much sand. Then there was the trolley. Now we all have cars. We need a solution that is for the safety of the public, people walking, people riding their bikes, but people need to live. And my son is disabled, and I really am concerned if we need to not live there anymore. I'm just looking for what the town might be able to do.
Well, it's a state-owned roadway, so the town does not have any control over it. So again, with all due respect, it's too early to tell what the impact of any improvement might be on any individual property. I mean, obviously, people bought properties over the last several decades knowing how much parking they legally had or did not have. We can't go back and fix any of that, nor can we go back and rewind the clock on how the north end of the beach or the south end of the beach was developed before there was any zoning. We're dealing with a built environment that has a lot of flaws in it, which I think everybody understands. If we were to close our eyes and to start from scratch, we would reconstruct Salisbury Beach in a whole different way. We would require 2 parking spaces for every lot. We would have a minimum lot size with a decent setback. None of that exists because it was all built before zoning. So we have to deal with the reality that we have. But your point is well made, and I think there isn't anybody up here that wants to impose a hardship on anybody, but we're looking at the bigger picture of the dangerous conditions on North End Boulevard and trying to make improvements that will improve those conditions with the minimal negative impact on everybody else. So as we continue through this process, I encourage you and others to keep expressing your concerns on that. And if we get to the point where we have a project or we have an alternative that can be tweaked, we will invite you back, everybody back, to comment, and we can make it the plan as safe as we can with the least amount of impact on people. Thank you. Yes, sir.
Good evening, Jim Fitzpatrick, North End Boulevard. My wife just spoke. Thank you to everyone for coming out, other public officials. A quick question to the engineer from the state. I'm sorry, I don't remember your name, but someone asked this question earlier. Is the complete streets, is that, when you said that was a policy, is it mandatory, or is that like we just like to see it built this way?
Well, the healthy transportation policy is the policy I referenced, and that specifically says that as a minimum standard, we provide a 5-foot bike lane in both directions and sidewalk. It's part of Green Dot healthy transportation, and as far as I forget what the other part was. I'm sorry? What was the other part of your question besides the...
If they were mandatory, if the...
It's mandatory in the sense that it's a policy that we try to provide the minimum standard, and our policy continues that if you can't meet that minimum, then we need to provide justification to build below that minimum, and that's what we would be building, a case to show why, for this particular project, adding sidewalk on the east side would be a hardship, and that would be part of that process. So the healthy transportation is a policy that mandates the minimum standards for us. Federal Highway has standards for their federal dollars to be spent in a certain way, but we also, Complete Streets is one of those things where we look at it from all users' perspective and not just a vehicle, not just a pedestrian, and not just a bike or a jogger.
I mean, I would like to say I support the concept as far as the pedestrian traffic goes. As far as bike lanes, I don't support that. I understand that's a policy of the state. But I would prefer to see the bikes, you know, some of the cyclists down this end, like live on North End Boulevard around the 200 block area, and they go sometimes as fast as the cars do. And you don't hear them coming, and they're just as dangerous as a car, as far as I'm concerned. So I'd prefer to see them share the road with the automobiles. As far as pedestrian improvements, I think that's important. My next question is, in the crosswalk areas, would it be possible as part of the design to raise the crosswalks? I think that would be helpful to slow the traffic down, just a consideration. And a question, I don't know if it's for the town manager or the select people, is it possible to do a home rule petition to lower the speeds in that, on that roadway, considering it's a state road?
To answer your last question first, the answer is yes, it is possible. I couldn't predict what the likelihood of the state legislature passing such a petition might be. It could potentially affect other communities as well, but it's something that if enough people wanted to take a look at that, that is a possibility. Again, I don't know what the likelihood of it is. And I could also comment in terms of how these projects get funded. There's a pool of federal money and state money available for projects at any given time. And as projects compete for that money, the more projects that meet the standards that Frank is talking about compared to projects that don't, they get higher up in the queue. So if you've got a project that meets all of the bike standards and the pedestrian standards and all of those standards, they're more likely going to get the funding before a project that would have to explain why they can't meet the standard or why it's a safety hazard for them to have, you know, a bicycle path with pedestrians, et cetera. So we want to put ourselves in the best position to get funding for these things, but also create the project that most people can kind of get behind. So it's not an easy equation.
Would you support a home rule petition to lower the speeds on North End Boulevard?
That's a good question. I haven't thought about it, to be honest with you. I am of the general philosophy that lowering speed limits is a good thing, but it's useless without enforcement. So there is a state law. There is a state law that allows communities to adopt lower speed limits across the entirety of any community. The problem with it is a policeman can't be in every street at every time enforcing it. So you could theoretically, you know, petition the legislature and get the speed limit reduced to 30, but unless the police are out there enforcing it all the time, you're going to create perhaps more resentment from people thinking that, you know, there should be, you know, more tickets given because the speed limit's 30 and people are going faster, but we only have so many guys on the police department. So are you creating a worse problem by creating a false set of expectations? I don't know. I'm certainly open to the idea. I could certainly talk to the members of the Board of Selectmen about it. It would something that would have to be proposed at town meeting.
Thank you, sir.
Good evening. My name is Joe Jumper. I'm a new resident of Salisbury Beach. In your opening statements, this is for the engineer, you said this is a resurfacing as opposed to a reconstruction? It's a total reconstruction? And okay, and the timetable to have that done?
There is no timetable, because as Frank just said, this is the first step in the process. You know, if by some miracle we all unanimously agreed on a concept today, he would have to go back and find the funding to send the engineers off to do more engineering until we get to a final design. Then we would have to have a public hearing, et cetera, and then it would have to get in the queue for funding. And there's no determination at this point when that might, commitment is to make it happen as soon as possible, but I can't give you a time frame.
I just have one more question. Could you put up slide A, North End Boulevard? There you go, yeah. Yeah, perfect. This is where I live. Right down here at the end is our driveway. Now, people are parking so close to our driveway on both sides that we have the mail truck difficulty coming in to deliver the mail. Any delivery trucks that come in have to park outside on the street and deliver the product on foot to the back of the buildings. I don't know if there's any signage going to be in place for driveways and side streets, especially on the western side, as to how much space they're going to leave so we can see what's coming down the street. There's going to be an accident like on Liberty Street tonight. Someone said there are times you just can't see what's coming down the other end of the street because they're so blocked. I mean, you got a pickup truck on both sides, and they're right on the edge of the driveway. You're taking your life in your hands getting out onto the street. Thank you.
So the engine, is this on? The engineer just mentioned to me that by law you cannot park within 20 feet of an intersection or 10 feet of a driveway. So that's an enforcement issue as well. If someone is parking within 20 feet of an intersection or 10 feet of your driveway, I urge you to call the PD and have them come down there and tag them.
I have called the local police department on many occasions, and the answer to me now, not that they're not doing their job, but it's not their road, they can't enforce it. Years ago, when you had the state police down here, they'd have 3 or 4 cruisers at the end of the center. They would make, and there'd be more cars towed here. People made livings off the cars that were towed by Simmies and a few of the others. So there's no place to have enforcement done because the state police aren't going to come down here for a parking violation.
That's actually not true. Our police department, whoever told you that, if in fact he told you that, was speaking out of turn because our police department does enforce on North End Boulevard. Now, I can't guarantee that every single complaint will be as quickly resolved as you would like it to see, but they do tag and tow people that are blocking hydrants or they're on corners of intersections. I understand it happens all the time, probably 24/7 in the summer, but they do enforce it.
Okay, could I propose that an internal memo be sent through the police department to make sure that they know that you can't park within 10 feet of a driveway and 20 feet of a curb?
I will speak to the chief. Thank you. Thank you. Yes, sir.
Thank you. I live on Liberty Street. I don't have a direct problem. I have an indirect problem with parking on North End Boulevard. It's been stated here before. If we have visitors, we have 2 parking spaces on Liberty Street. And it's a very narrow street, as are most of them in that area. So you have to live with what you've got. But unfortunately, I experienced all of these problems that you had, trying to get in and out of Liberty Street, trying to find a place to park when I come up and my kids are here with their kids. I have 11 grandchildren. Where am I going to put them? Don't answer that. Look, I have seen projects like this, and by the way, you can't give us a date. As of the date the project's approved, you must have some idea how long the project will take, not when it will start. How long will it take? My concerns are, in the summer, you can't do anything on that road. Forget it. You can't get through there now. If you're digging up half the road, we had an accident out there. It was a motorcyclist. You had 4 cruisers. You had 2 fire apparatus, an ambulance, spectators, people slowing down to look and see what's going on, rubberneckers. You put a construction crew out there, you might as well close the beach. It's not going to happen. So that's one. That's going to have to happen in the off-season, not the high season. Look, I would ask that this whole presentation be put online so people like myself will have a little bit of a background in engineering. Not much, but enough. Different discipline. We'll be able to look at this and say, okay, I have questions. And by the way, some of the parking issues, like right across from Liberty Street, they park head in, they're not going to park there. Right now, what is the actual paved area of that road? Does anybody tell me? Is it 60 feet now? Pavement edge to pavement edge? Does anybody know? Well, that's the problem. You get that white line down there. I'm looking at some of these dimensions, and I'm saying, they're going to lose more than just head-in parking. They're not going to be able to get out of their cars the way it's figured now. So that's why they park head-in. You got 4 units right across from me. They have 4 parking spaces. They're going to lose 2, guaranteed, if they park parallel to the roadway. There's no other way. Cars are what, 17 feet long? Well, I'm dating myself. They used to be a lot longer when I was a kid. But look, these are, no matter what you do, there's going to be shared pain here, folks. Everybody's going to suffer a little. There's no question about it. Nobody's going to walk away from here dancing and saying, I got everything I wanted. Not going to happen. Part of the problem is the lack of any kind of zoning control years ago. You look at them, some houses down towards the center about 2 feet apart. I don't even know how you maintain them. I certainly couldn't get in between of them. You know, so look, you've got to deal with what you've got. I wish you a lot of luck. I did a lot of project management in my day. I'm too old for that now. I don't have the patience that it takes for when somebody at the front end screws up and backs everything up at the end. My cousin is the chief engineer for District 1. So I hear horror stories from him. But look, I just want to give you the confidence of my family. You'll do the right thing for us. One thing you should investigate, take a lesson from Hampton. Buy some of these distressed properties and put municipal parking in there with meters. You want to take care of the day trippers? There you go. They have the same problem at Hampton, and they have one-side parking on that main drag. And believe me, if you try to go up that road on a Friday night or a Saturday night, you might as well be walking because it's very slow. All right? And by the way, state police will help out the local police. One last thing. You go to Florida where they have a crosswalk, you don't stop at people in that crosswalk, it's a $100 fine. Right there and then. Now, I don't know how you enforce it without cameras, without additional, personnel. I'm telling you, you could pay for a couple of patrolmen with what I see out there. People don't stop it if you have little kids out there. Not to mention these bikes, what do you call these where you have 2 people on a bike? You're like a little rickshaw type thing. That's going to be in a bike lane. Sure it is. It's going to take the whole bike lane. I don't want to, look, am I the last one? No, oh good. I can't be blamed for being the last one. I want to let this gentleman have a chance. All I wanted to say is, I laud you for trying to make the situation better. But understand, parking is a big, big issue here. It really is. Safety, number one, you don't want to see anybody get hurt. We saw 2 of them tonight. But parking is a big issue. And for those of you that say your property values won't go down, see what happened down at the Cape.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Hi, Dave Broadhurst, 543 North End Boulevard. Nothing about the plans. I like the effort on all 3. I had a question. I didn't say anything on the plan about lighting with crosswalks. I have a crosswalk pretty close to my house. There's a street light that works here and there. Also on the plan, they're going to be moving the crosswalk where there will be no lighting. It's dark down there, the fog. I think lighting would be big for safety. Not just, hate to use the word crappy street lights, but something decorative maybe. Beautify our beach a little bit. Like you see some of the nice pole lamps. Something to beautify it a little bit and, safety too. It's awfully dark trying to cross that street at night, and in the crosswalks, there's no lighting. So that's my little 2 cents as a local builder.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Actually, that's a very insightful comment, and I'm sure the engineers will take that into consideration with regard to where we actually place the crosswalks. But your point is well made about the lighting, and it would be nice. That's right. And, I'm certainly not opposed in the long term to looking at more decorative lighting or something like that. But right now, we're, functionally trying to make sure things are safe. But your points are well made. Thank you. Are there any other comments that anybody have this evening? Okay. Yes, we do have the sign-in sheet. If you missed an opportunity to sign in, if you came in late, please do so. Yes, sir. One more.
Hi, how are you? Can you hear me? I have 2 questions I want to ask. One
it's a question that's been asked repetitively over the whole night, is the speed limit on North End Boulevard. In most cities and towns, in city roads, they have a blinking light when you go to a school district. It's 30 miles an hour during the summer. And once it's school time, when that light's blinking, you're doing 20. They do the same thing on your state highways. They put a sign up there, awareness, roads crummy, the well is bad, and they post it from 65 to 40, repetitively, on all your state roads. Why couldn't they do the same thing for North End Boulevard? On both ends, coming off of 286, coming in from the opposite end. When you have all the, excuse me, when you have all the visitors during the summer, and you're doing, like everybody else says, 40 miles an hour, those striped lines don't stop cars. Haven't seen it happen yet. So if it was posted during those 3 months of the year up to Labor Day, it's 30 miles an hour on both ends, then they would know immediately it's 30 miles an hour. It blinks, just like the school thing. And when school gets out, it goes back to 30 miles an hour. That would take care of that option. I believe that's how it would go. Another question I want to ask you is, I'm just going to use map A. Let's presume this is North End Boulevard, and we live on this side, going towards Hampton. Now, everybody parks coming in this way for the most part. Now, with your street renovation and the walking path or the dog path, whatever you're going to put in over there, does that mean all the people who bought up to the white line so they could have, each unit would have 2 or 3 parking coming in on this angle? And if you put this bike path, or you put whatever you're going to do over there, does that mean that you can no longer be able to park this way in front of your home? So in front of our home, we have 3 available areas now to that white line that goes down. Okay? Now, if you take 5 feet to put a walking path, does that mean you can no longer park this way? You have to park this way? Can you explain that? I don't understand that part of it. It makes no sense. I'd rather have a parking spot than having some kids zipping by 80 miles an hour on a bike.
Well, again, as Frank mentioned earlier, it's too early to tell now what the impact is going to be on any individual person's home in their own particular parking situations. There could be instances in which people who are parking out into the right-of-way would only be able to park parallel at some point. We can't answer those questions at this point. It's too early.
No, but what I'm getting at is the people that, whether you're seasonal or you live here year-round, they bought those because of the parking that came with each different home. Some had 1 parking, some had up to 5 parking. Now, a lot of the other people had no parking, so they're scrambling for parking spaces. But the people who live there, whether it's seasonal or year-round, now have the option of, I had 3 spaces, because we have a 2-family. One's a year-round rent, we're seasonal. Now, you rent the apartment, you change all the views over here. Now the tenant has parking, the owners have to go look for parking. That doesn't make sense, to have to lose that, because not only are you going to lose 63 spots or 57 or 85, the homeowners are going to be losing where they park too. That doesn't make sense.
Well, we don't know where those parking spots are at this point. And you can park, anybody that is parking on their own private property right now, we're not taking any of that away from anybody. A lot of people are parking on the state-owned right-of-way, and that's where people will be impacted, wherever they are. I agree with that. But it isn't, you can't assume that there'll be, in one particular property, the renter's space will be safe and the owner will have to find another place. We don't know that yet. It's too early to tell.
Well, common sense is going to tell you, if you take 5 feet of my property where I could park this way, it's no longer available to me because I might be parking where a biker might hit the rear end of my car, what do we do? So it's unavoidable that it's going to encroach on everybody that has parking at their home now. Well, how's not necessarily? If I took 5 feet of your driveway and you had a 30-foot truck, where would you go?
Let me reiterate, on your own private property, there is no impact whatsoever. If you're parking your cars completely on your private property, there's no impact whatsoever. If half of your car is into the street, well, then that might be a problem for you. But we don't know in any individual person's house. You can't assume that you or this gentleman or that lady is going to lose any feet anywhere because we don't know yet. Nothing has been designed. These are just concepts.
Yeah, but does it still resort back to this white line? I don't care. Nothing's chipped in stone. This white line means everybody brought up to that white line back then, specifically so you could have that parking. And you can't surpass that. And in the wintertime, the only deviation to that is you have to be 3 feet from that white line for the plowing season. That's the only difference, is the wintertime pertaining to that. So if you put a bike path here where you have this little thing, people are going to surpass that parking this way instead of, they'll have to park this way, which eliminates not 63 spots, it'd be about another 5 or 10%. People are going to lose their parking.
I guess I don't agree with you. Fundamentally, I don't know what else I can tell you. Oh, sorry. I see we're losing people rapidly. If there are no other further comments, let me just wrap up by thanking everybody for coming. Anybody that signed up will certainly, as we go forward, Lisa wants to say something before we leave. Okay, that's a good point. The slides presentation is going to be sent to the Public Works Director, and she's going to put it on the town's website, so it will be available for people to look at as well. Again, if you signed up, when there are updates, we will notify you. We will also notify the 2 organizations who are well represented here this evening. And I'd like to thank Frank and Pat and Lou and all of the consultants for coming to the site this evening. And thank you all for coming. Good night.
SCTV presents our new chaptering feature of our video on demand service. Type in a keyword or just select a meeting. Click the Chapters tab at right, then choose any section to watch. The player jumps right to it. Visit SCTVMC.org and click Video on Demand to get started.
Next, we are going to hear from our sheriff. The law is in the house, so our sheriff, Kevin Coppinger. Thanks for your patience.
Well, good morning, everyone. Wow, that's kind of low. Good morning, everyone. Oh, much better. I know you have a good meal and have coffee and listen to a lot of speakers. Just want to make sure you weren't asleep. But considering the speakers that we've already heard from, I don't know how you could, because they were all excellent, and hopefully I can stand up to that standard. Anyway, first of all, to scholarship winners, Grace and Emily, congratulations. I think that's wonderful. Good luck in the future. And of course, to all the moms in here, happy Mother's Day tomorrow. I hope you enjoy your day. Hope it's as sunny as it is today, but either way, enjoy. You know, Ed just joked the law is in the house. I got to tell you, I've been in corrections now coming up on about 2.5 years, and it is a time of major change within the correctional field. A lot of you may have followed this over the last year or so with criminal justice reform. Our elected officials, including Senator Zoglio over here and your other state and elected officials from your area up here, worked very hard with us in the Sheriff's Department to craft some really good changes that I think we all need to address a lot of the issues, including the opioid issue that was discussed when Congressman Moulton was speaking. So I'd just like to touch on a couple of those things, starting with the issue of mental health. Essex County, believe it or not, has the #1 population now of inmates amongst all 14 counties in Massachusetts. About 50% of our inmates suffer from mental illness. And that's very difficult to deal with. And I got to be honest with you, with that number of inmates, I always say this up front, we have a lot of people that are in our jails and our prisons at the state level who belong there. I'm not going to lie to you. Let's not sugarcoat this. There are people in jails and prisons who should never see the light of day. It is just a fact. But on the flip side of that, there are a lot of people that are in our jails, and I can speak for Middleton, who don't belong there. And a lot of these folks are victims of mental illness. And we can talk a lot about prevention mechanisms and everything else, but I'm at the end of the food chain here in the criminal justice system, so I'm going to focus on corrections and what we do now. But part of the criminal justice bill gave us a lot of alternatives now and some new initiatives to address the mental illness within our facilities. One of the things I'm very proud to say is we have trained all our staff in mental health first aid. And we do that for obvious reasons. We're dealing with these inmates every day, and the correctional officers that work in the housing units know these guys as well as they know their own families. They're in there for 8 hours a day in a confined area. So when we train them to see changes in behavior, what's going on? Are they not getting up when they're supposed to? Are they not following the rules? And try to figure out, are they just being defiant, or are they being off their medication so they don't understand how to follow the rules? So by training them in mental health first aid, that's a big one. Second big one that we've done, and I'm proud to say last month we graduated our first class of about 8 officers. We have another group going in June to a second class, but crisis intervention teams, better known as CIT. Now you can imagine in a jail, it's not exactly a nice, cozy, calm atmosphere every day. As I said before, there are a lot of individuals in there who don't like to be in there, and they let us know that every day. So sometimes, issues get turbulent in there, and, we train our officers to obviously tactical, go in there and control the situations. Our traditional role is care, custody, and control. But I like to tell our officers, we pay you not to fight, but to control. And one of the new things that we did with the CIT, this crisis intervention teams, is to teach our officers how to go in there when we have somebody in crisis, how to use what, in my opinion, is their best weapon, and that is their mouth, their words. And I can tell you, after we graduated that first class, we did have an incident in one of our housing units. We had an inmate who refused to come out of the cell and refused to follow directions and stay compliant, and we brought one of our new CIT officers in there. And it took about an hour, but he was able to talk him down with his words and get him compliant, so we didn't have to send in what we call our tactical team, and so they didn't have to go on hands-on, which is a win-win for everybody. Nobody gets hurt, the inmate gets out of the cell, we get him over to our infirmary, he sees the mental health professionals that work with us each and every day, he gets his treatment, and we're back on the straight path. Jumping over to the opioid epidemic. We all know that's been just devastating this state, this region for quite a while, decades. And the only good thing about it is, in the last 5, 6, 7 years, it is so widespread that it really was brought to the forefront of our attention. And now we're able to really talk about it instead of just hiding it in the closet that a lot of people wouldn't do if they had a loved one who had a substance abuse addiction. So one of the things we've had in Middleton Jail for several years is a detox unit. We have 2 units in there, one for the men and one for the women. 42 beds in each one in a 28-day program. We work very closely with the drug courts in Lynn, Lawrence, and now in Haverhill, which has just opened up since they opened up the rehabbed court a few weeks ago. What happens really is, this is a voluntary thing. They're working with the courts, the defense attorneys, the DA's office, local police, and probation. Individuals will come into the detox, and they go through the 28-day program. They successfully complete it. They go back in front of the judge. Hopefully the judge will let them get back out into the community. We were doing, and we have been doing, a portion of medically assisted treatment, better known as MAT, And if you work in the law enforcement field, we love acronyms, so we just use those all the time. But MAT is really coming out of the forefront again out of some of the criminal justice reform last year. But with our detox, we offer Naltrexone, which is a drug, so after they're clean and they're sober and they're dry, they can give them the shot every month, and it'll give them 30 days of treatment that they hopefully, that just reduces the desire to go out and get drugs again and get high. It blocks the receptors in their brain so they don't have those cravings. Part of the criminal justice bill, they allowed us to put 7 pilot programs together within the Commonwealth, and I'm proud to say Essex is one of them. So we're going to bring in 2 other forms of overdose, overdose prevention, but substance abuse treatment, which is buprenorphine, which is better known as Suboxone, and methadone. These are major, major changes coming into a correctional institution, especially with methadone. Methadone is what the DEA calls a Schedule II drug, and it's very heavily regulated by the federal government. And by law, we just can't bring it in. It's not something as simple as, like outside, you can get onto a methadone clinic. There's a lot of them within the county. You can just, if you have an addiction, you can go down there. You can get your medication on a daily basis. You can get your treatment from counselors. We can't bring it into the jail because it's a heavily regulated Schedule II drug. We are working with the Executive Office of Public Safety in Boston and the Department of Public Health and the DEA to get a license to do it. So come September 1st, that's our goal. That was a legislative mandate. We will be giving methadone to our inmates when they arrive, and Suboxone. Suboxone's a little easier to do, but I got to tell you, Suboxone is the #1 drug that's smuggled into the institution. And it comes in either like a little strip, like you can go down to CVS and get those little whitening strips for your teeth, and comes in that form, or a pill. But one of those little strips, if they smuggle it into the jail, is worth $200 inside. That's a lot of money to be inside. So I'm proud to say we have a private health care provider, by the way, a company called WellPath, who provide 24/7 health care to our inmate population. And they came on board with us 100% on this MAT program. And now we're partnering up with another one of the methadone providers up in the northern part of the county, up in Lawrence, who are going to bring in the methadone with us, working with the DEA with those regulations. So, again, I said it wasn't an easy job to do, so we had to take a print shop. We have a print shop up there that we do a lot of stuff in nonprofits, so we had to move that out. We're going to create a new dispensary. We're just about set to start construction on that, so it'll be ready for September. But come September 1st, we will be giving methadone and Suboxone to our inmates and continue the Naltrexone program, also known as Vivitrol. And very quickly, what will happen is when somebody comes into the booking, to the intake, when they first arrive at the jail, if they're on a confirmed prescription, we will maintain that prescription for them while they're inside. And as they get towards the end of their sentence, 30 days before they're going to be released, we will then induce them on one of these medications if they want to, if the doctor prescribes it, so when they leave us and they go back to the community, they won't overdose. Now, you may have heard this statistic before, but people leaving the jail are at 120 times more apt to overdose than John Q. Public, who someone's not incarcerated. And that's why we're going to do these, bring these new medications in. And one of the other things that I really want to mention before I finish up here is our reentry program, especially up in this area of the county, the northern portion of Essex, where we have partnered up with Essex County, a group of Essex County police chiefs, started right here in Newburyport from Marshal Mark Murray. It's just a consortium of we're working together, sharing of information together on folks who have overdose problems. We'll give them the data when they're leaving the jail. We give them here. They're partnering, I believe, with local health care and local social service agencies in the area. So, when we do the handoff, when somebody's coming back to their city and town, the local police department know it, the local health care workers know it, so these folks will have services available to them. So, as I say to the inmates all the time when I see them and I talk to them, thanks for staying, don't come back. We don't want to see you. Nothing personal, but don't come back. So. I know you've had a lot of speakers here. I just want to finish up, but I will say this. I am very proud to say that we have produced our very first annual report for the Essex County Sheriff's Department. It is online. Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. It is online. And you probably never remembered, but www.essexsheriffma.org, or as I tell people, just Google it. You'll find us. But there's a lot more information on that. There's a lot more information about all the other programs that we do. But we are here to serve the inmates, so when they come back to your communities, number one, they won't recidivate and they won't go back to a life of crime, that they will hopefully reunite with their families, get a job, get back on the payroll, and become good, productive citizens. And hopefully, if we could ever put me out of business at the jail, that would be wonderful, but I don't think it's going to happen, but we're going to continue to do the best job we can. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Kevin.
So now we're going to hear from another statewide elected official who has been here, I think, pretty much every time since she first ran for state auditor several terms ago. And please give a warm welcome to our state auditor, Suzanne Bump.
Thank you. I really am delighted to be here, and I appreciate the fact that Congressman Moulton was here. He is a man who truly does have the courage of his convictions and is willing to put himself out in service. I thought it was particularly poignant that he pointed out that the 4 tours of duty that he did was in support of a war that he did not support. But he did it for our benefit because it was an obligation that he saw that he had as a citizen of the United States. So I want to thank you for the support that you showed to me in November. I was delighted to be reelected to a 3rd term as your state auditor. I'm very proud of the work that we are doing in the auditor's office to improve government accountability and transparency, trying to help make government more effective and more efficient, better serve you, better use your dollars. And those are the things really that the office is known for. But there's another side to the work that we do there that I just want to mention briefly, because it isn't just about seeing how efficiently we are doing the things that we are doing. It's also about identifying unmet needs in our society and in our governmental programs. And in that vein, just a couple of weeks ago, my Division of Local Mandates picked up on 2 different things that we have kind of been recurring themes in the work of the office over the past 8 years. One is looking at issues of child welfare, particularly as expressed in the work of the Department of Children and Families. And the other is looking at the issue of local mandates and the fact that, in fact, state government does not provide all of the support to local governments for the programs that they ask them to undertake. And those two thrusts of the work of the office came together recently in a report that we did that took a look at how well we're serving the educational needs of our children in foster care and in state care. Most of these children have gone through, go through multiple placements when they are in foster care. And I think that we can appreciate how that affects their development, their emotional development, what family stability means in the life of a child. But I have a little friend, he is now 10 years old, and his mother was telling me that he was so excited in August to be returning to school in September. He wasn't missing his friends in particular, he wasn't missing his teachers or his bus drivers. He was excited to be going into his 4th grade because it was going to be the first time in his young educational career that he was going back to the same school that he was in June. This is a young boy who had been removed from his parents' home several years ago. He missed more days than he attended of both kindergarten and 1st grade. In 2nd grade, he was in a different school with a different family. In 3rd grade, he finally found stability in the home of a friend of mine who took him in along with his 2 siblings and ultimately adopted these 3 children. When he was going into 3rd grade with her, he still hadn't learned how to read because of all the time that he had missed in school, and the fact that he was bouncing from one school to another and no one could really get their hands on him long enough to make a difference in his young life. Now in the 4th grade, he is still struggling. And he is, I wouldn't say resentful, that goes a little bit too far, but he's jealous of his little sister in pre-K who's learning how to read because he never had that opportunity. And he, unfortunately, is typical of the 6,800 children that we have in this Commonwealth in foster care and in state care. They're lacking family stability, they're lacking educational continuity. It means that they drop out more frequently, they're truant more frequently, they end up in bad jobs, they don't go on to college, many of them end up in incarceration. We have an obligation to help these children in all of the ways that we can, particularly by supporting closer collaboration between DCF and our school systems, so that when a child is brought to the doorstep of a new school, then immediately records are accessible, because they're not. And schools, it can often take days in order to find out what grade a child should be placed in, never mind what program they should be placed in. And 45 to 50% of these kids come needing special education services. You already know everything that I am talking about right now. You live this day in and day out. Frankly, I never had thought of this until my friend was telling me about my little friend, the fourth grader. We need, as a Commonwealth, to address this important issue. The numbers are only growing with the problems in our society, the lack of family stability, the opioid crisis. We need to help, the state needs to help as well our school districts cope with the costs of providing the programming for these children, or sometimes the transportation for these children who may be trying to maintain educational continuity by staying in their original school, but may be placed with a foster family miles and miles away. This is a serious challenge, but I think we have a real opportunity in the Commonwealth right now to address this, because there are a couple of different things going on. One, the legislature is looking at revamping educational funding for all of the schools across the Commonwealth, because there's a general recognition that our funding formula is antiquated, it's inadequate. So they are looking now at how it is that we should fund education fairly for all of the kids across the Commonwealth. So there's an opportunity to do that. There are also working groups in the legislature that are looking at issues particular to districts in school transportation. A previous report of ours had looked at the transportation costs for regional schools, particularly in rural areas, because those transportation costs are eating up so much of their budgets that they're having to take teachers out of the classroom in order to pay for this. Clearly, this is an obligation that the state should be sharing and not imposing completely on the backs of the local school districts. And lastly, there is continued interest on the part of legislators and child welfare groups to continue to push DCF to improve the way that it handles children and families in need. There are legislative, again, working groups outside even the committee process. There's a foster children's caucus that's at work. All of these folks have really welcomed the information that we have put in front of them so that they can make better informed decisions, so that we as a Commonwealth can meet our moral obligations to these children. If the state's going to take them into their care and custody, then they have a responsibility to give them every opportunity that is available to every other child in a stable home. So I hope that if these are matters that are of interest to you, you might take a look at the website, my website, and the report. So mass.gov/auditor. Look at that report. If you're on a school committee, I was very pleased to work with the Association of School Committees and School Superintendents on this. I spoke recently at a conference. They are united behind this effort to improve educational outcomes for these really vulnerable and deserving kids in our society. I want to thank you for the opportunity to allow me to provide this kind of service to the Commonwealth, and I want to thank you for all that you do day in and day out to sustain our democracy. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Susan Polishek, and I'm the chair of the Salisbury Zoning Board of Appeals, and I am appealing to you tonight to ask if you might get involved and join us. We currently have 2 openings. One is for a permanent member and one for an alternate member. We are down to only 4 board members, and many times we can't conduct business because we need to have at least 4 and preferably 5 at all times. So if you're interested in being a part of this community, if you'd like to get involved in our community, then it would be absolutely fantastic if you'd contact Neil Harrington to tell him that you're interested in joining the Zoning Board of Appeals.
Our final speaker, and thank you so much for your patience. You have been in our part of the district so many times during election time, and since you've been elected, Senator Diana DeZoglio has been an incredible advocate for our part of the district, incredibly responsive. I emailed her yesterday morning about a budget amendment in the Senate, got an answer in about an hour and a half. Usually you're about half an hour, so you're slowing down a little bit. But she's been a really strong voice for us, so thank you for being here and welcome.
I appreciate it. Thank you, Ed. Good morning, Democrats. All right, good. You're still with me. You're still with me. What an informative morning this has been. What great guest speakers this morning. Sheriff, thank you so much. We in the legislature really appreciate all that you do on the public safety side. I'm super happy that the annual report is done. I look forward to looking over that. That's really helpful to legislators when we go through the budget process, understanding your priorities, your needs, what you need for the future. Thank you also for the breakdown about the opioid epidemic and about how that is impacting not only inmates but also those who are leaving, and working on the rate of recidivism, highlighting that as something that's important. I know I've spoken to a lot of you on a regular basis, and I feel like I know a lot of you so personally that we have our conversations on the phone. A lot of you will text me with anything that you need. If you don't have my number, please get it. Ed has it. Feel free to reach out to me. I'm very tangible. I'm very accessible. I'm the local person here. That's why I'm going last. I had the time to hang around because I live just down the road from here. But I loved what the sheriff said so much about reducing the rate of recidivism, because helps to lead into my conversation that I want to have with you about the state budget that we are working on currently. The House just voted on their version of the budget for the entire state. The governor had put out his proposal. The House of Representatives just voted on their proposal. And now we in the state Senate are going to be taking up our budget in a little over a week. But we did just have our budget released, and it is a bold, very progressive budget, and I am really excited about that. That's before all of the amendments. So Senate President Spilka, Chair Mike Rodrigues did a tremendous job at identifying the needs and priorities that are our shared needs and priorities statewide, and really taking the time to listen to all of us who have unique priorities and challenges in our communities. And one of the things that the sheriff was talking about was reducing the rate of recidivism for people that are leaving the criminal justice system, going out, trying to find work, trying to find a place to live, and just being unsuccessful because they don't have the resources that they need to be able to succeed. So what ends up happening? They go right back into the system. And I'm proud to say that in this upcoming budget, I've been working with the chair of Ways and Means for a new line item that was included in the rollout of the budget, so we didn't have to fight for an amendment, to create a pilot program that was started through working with the United Teen Equality Center. It's going to start in Essex County, but the sheriff's endorses. That will be a pilot program to implement mental health services, allow social workers, allow people who can guide with career opportunities and all sorts of those things, for those people to come into the prison before the inmates are released and start working with them during their time there, and get them set up so that when they leave, they have an opportunity as they're walking out the door. So we're allocating $4 million towards that pilot program for this upcoming year, and I'm really excited about that. We couldn't do it without the partnership with the sheriffs and others, so thank you for working with us on that. Thank you. Other things that I know are of tremendous importance to this region in particular, where we have the regional school districts, and more rural communities, is the issue of education. And I know that I've spoken with you again many times about this, and those of you who read the paper have heard about what's going on with this. But right now, we are fighting hard in the Senate to make sure that we are adequately funding education. And the governor came in with numbers that were just not adequate. The House also came in, they did a little bit better, but still with numbers that just weren't adequate. So the Senate bumped up the numbers for public education across the board for the state by $50 million more than what even the House proposed in their budget. That is all going to trickle down in a really positive way to our communities here and make it a little bit easier to provide those resources that we so desperately need, especially in our more rural, suburban, and regional school districts. The work's not going to be done, though, in the state budget. We are funding incrementally. It's 1/7 of the identified need that we're doing in this upcoming budget. So we have a lot of work to do, and we are going to be working on a comprehensive sort of an education reform bill again. We haven't looked at the foundation budget formula since 1993, and we know that that's over 25 years ago. We need to make changes if we're going to see significant progress in funding our public schools more appropriately, efficiently, and more fairly and equitably across the board. So we will be taking up an education proposal after this upcoming budget. But then we talk about all this funding, right, that we need. Where are we getting the revenue from? Because we know we're spending what's coming in right now. And we happen to be running at a surplus right now, and that's great. Revenues were really up during the month of April, so we're excited about that, but that's not consistent for anybody who's been paying attention. We don't have the consistent revenue stream that we need coming in. So in our Senate budget proposal, we propose a 15% tax on opioid manufacturers. And we also propose a 75% tax on the wholesale value of our vaping and e-cigarette projects. Who is vaping? The children are vaping. The children are vaping. I have a $50,000 earmark in the state budget right now that I'm requesting for one of my local public school districts so they can get vaping sensors, because they say it's out of control right now. It's out of control. They can't stop the kids from doing it. That the teacher will turn their, it's not even just in the bathrooms. I mean, it used to be smoking in the boys' room. It's not that anymore. It is something that is so out of control right now. The teachers and the superintendents are telling us that these kids, when the teacher turns their head in the classroom, that is enough time to vape. It's undetectable. So we have a generation right now, and we already went through this. We already went through this with cigarettes and big tobacco, where the state government and the federal government spent billions and billions and billions of dollars on the advertisements, on public education of any kind that we could do to try to prevent these kids from starting at a young age, to prevent addiction. And we all talk about the opioid epidemic, which is the #1 thing that's taking lives right now, you know, but it's this tobacco issue, this is back right now, folks. And it's happening in the halls of our schools. So we talk about the need for revenue for education. I mean, this is something that will greatly benefit not only our need for revenue to give back to public education, but that's going to help to prevent the purchase of these products by our young people. Price it out. These kids, they're going out and buying the stuff with their allowances, right, or whatever they have. 75% tax, done. We need to take a strong, strong approach towards this if we are going to see this thing squashed. We need to take a strong approach now. So. So, sorry, I get a little passionate about that topic because I went through it when the commercials were running when I was a kid, and I remember those Camel ads. I remember those Camel ads, and it's disgusting what's happening again with these flavors and all of these, things that are clearly targeted towards our children. So we are working on that. Amongst other things, and I'm going to start to wrap it up because I know it's been a really long morning, but I do just want to briefly just mention the fact that we are also working on a lot of your environmental concerns in this upcoming budget. I have proposed a significant amount of funding go towards the Merrimack River District Commission, which I'm sure I know I see a couple of people back there. Merrimack River Watershed Council, thank you for all your work, and other groups that have been working on this with me. I filed legislation to create the commission for the river, and I'm trying to get that passed in the budget so we can get started with this. It's already had a public hearing. It has support from the chair of the Environmental Committee. I'm excited about that, so we're going to try to get this through the budget. But I'm also trying to make sure that we have resources for that commission so that we actually have a budget to be able to do the things that we need to do to get a report back to the legislature and to our local elected officials. That will look at not only the CSO issue, but it will look at the overall health of the Merrimack River and making sure that we have access to clean water here. I also am proposing an amendment to do a pilot program in the city of Newburyport, and that would be a pilot project that looks at the issue of pre-notification for this combined sewer overflow issue that we're having. What's happening right now is we have a bill that I'm strongly supportive of that's going through the legislature that's a notification system, and that's great, and it's going to be tremendously helpful to us. But the problem is that by the time you get notified, you've already been in the water, during the time that it was happening. So it's great to know, hey, yesterday when I jumped in the Merrimack River, I was swimming around in a bunch of, you fill in the blank. But what we're trying to do is get some sort of a system and working together and collaborating with DPH, DEP, DCR, and then of course our local advocacy groups on coming up with an electronic system, a pre-notification, maybe a color-coded system we're looking at where you would see, potentially a red flag, down at the beach or at a public access point to the river, or you'd be able to go on an application, because we're looking at an electronic version of this as well, go on websites or on a website or on the application on your phone and check and say, what's the status of the river looking like today? And it would be based on our knowledge of, hey, when there's heavy rainfall of this magnitude, generally we see an overflow. So proceed with caution. Just to get it out there that generally when we see this amount of rainfall, you should know that it's possible so that you can make informed decisions yourself. Power went out. There's an overflow potential. So we want to make sure that you have adequate time before you actually go into the water. And then just one recent success that I'm really happy about, we did secure, Senator Ives previously had filed in a bond bill $2 million to go back when we originally started hearing about the CSO issue. It was because of an outage, a power outage at the Greater Lawrence Sanitary District. And that was where all of this started, where everyone started paying attention to this. Senator Ives filed some money for that in the bond bill to get them a generator so that the next time the power goes out, we don't see millions of gallons of sewage pouring into the river. And that was being held up by the administration. I met with DEP, I met with DCR. We had a very productive discussion and conversation about the need for that generator, and I'm very happy that they have agreed to release that funding. So we're getting the generator. So I have a lot more to say, but I know that you have all been very patient with all of us as your guest speakers this morning, and that you probably want to go out and enjoy the beautiful sunshine. But I'll end with just saying, thanks so much for your advocacy. Thanks so much for your support. None of us can do anything that we do without your support, without you keeping us informed of what it is that's important to you. And like Jeremy was saying, we need your support to be able to take the right votes, to do the right things in the legislature. Without you, the other side gets really loud and they overwhelm the conversation and take over the conversation. So keep being the strong, amazing advocates you are, and I believe that together we can continue to make a difference. Have a great morning.
The town clerk has informed me that a quorum is present, and I would like to call the town of Salisbury's annual special town meeting.
From large-scale cultivation in California to hemp processing and farming in Tennessee. We've been working specifically and exclusively in Massachusetts for the past 3.5 years now.
Good evening. Welcome to this month's Harbor Commission meeting, August 15th, 2019. We'll start off with a roll call. Christopher Chapman, present. Reggie Santos. Mark Audette, not here. Tom Olson, not here. Dave Cretion, not here. Mark St. Jean.
Present.
Charlie McLean.
Present.
Dave Mitchell.
Present.
Jonathan Andrews, not here. Ray Pike.
Here.
Everybody's had a chance to look at the meeting minutes from last month?
Yep.
I'll accept a motion to,
A motion to accept the minutes of last month. I second.
all in favor? Unanimous? Okay, correspondence.
All right, we spent a little time on the phone with our new pump-out boat manufacturer. Discussed that last time about the radio reception not being adequate, and we had a repair job done with a new antenna, and when we took off the old antenna, we discovered that it was frayed underneath. So I'm going to mail the old antenna back, hope for a replacement. Yeah, that was the plan. I didn't want to pursue that plan without a replacement, already made. I didn't want to wait for the maintenance. So I expect that he'll be okay with that. I don't think he'll hold us responsible. So, but other outgoing stuff, the June citation, we have one boater remaining who will be going to court. I've discussed that with Sergeant Sforza, and all of the July citations have been mailed to the recipients. I've received a couple of phone calls on those.
How many July tickets went out?
I didn't count the envelopes, but I want to say about 10 or 12. 9 is in the 9 to 12 range. It's a small package left. I had mailed about 4 of them a week before, so there may be more.
And we've still got the August tickets to review and send out?
I'm going to meet with Glenn tomorrow at 10 o'clock. We had scheduled something today. He requested a meeting tomorrow, so
okay.
I'll sit with him tomorrow. On the incoming, we continue to get calls for the wait list. I've got a couple of people who are interested in next year and potentially on a float. We did lose a boater. Wayne Petrucci had a float with a couple of boats on it in years past. Upriver. He passed about the 3rd week in July. Had a heart attack, and I'm corresponding with a mutual friend who's in contact with his wife. We're trying to get her desire for either releasing it or selling it or whatever, so we can either make sure that it gets hauled out for the winter properly and hopefully find a new buyer. So there may be a couple of people happy with that outcome. And all the paperwork has come and gone between West Newbury and the Finance Department for the intermunicipal agreement. I have received a bunch of names for the new pump-out boat. I am embarrassed to be here without them, because I had started a spreadsheet. I was going to put the names on there and bring them here for a vote. I realized as I was typing this up, hey, I said I was going to email them. That slipped my brain. So the best I can do now is to email them out. If there are enough people who have a preference, then and that works, and we can do it in a few weeks, then we'll correspond. But I believe everybody would. If you did not get my copy, I emailed the agenda to you, or my report to you. If you didn't get that, then let me know, and I'll make sure that I'll get an update on your email address. And that way we can success.
All the email addresses are on the Reggie
I'll-
updated.
Yeah, right,
contact
and I'll
sheet.
double check that. I used an old list that I had sent out that was missing a couple, but.
You mailed it tonight.
I emailed it
I
tonight.
I see it here.
Good, oh, good. All right. And that's the bulk of the correspondence.
Okay, great. Any questions? We can move right into the Harbor Master's report.
All right, I guess you've got an update on the demolition for the floats. We had voted on that, but I guess since the sailboats have been left off, we will discuss the update later. I've received no update on the potential for credit card transactions automatically that the finance department had offered to enable us to take transient boaters. Coincidentally, we did have a transient boater come in this weekend, and he called me back this morning and said, "I'm sorry, I didn't find anybody, left town, and where do I mail a check?" So he's going to mail us a check at $1 a foot for 2 nights. And that should be an easy deposit for that. And I've texted and emailed the candidate to do some CAD work for us for the rock riprap wall on the west end of the parking lot, and I'm trying to track her down to see if I can get an appropriate drawing to get that done before the floats get hauled out. This weekend, I'm going to be re-stenciling a 15-minute tie-up on the yellow stripe out front and try and get the whole yellow and the stencil in place. I guess latex generally needs an annual update. Yeah, some of those poke. And did a new exercise with Reggie's free firewood sign. Cut up a whole bunch of the logs that have been hauled up from the river, and they're going in smaller loads. We've had a couple of guys come by and just taken everything that was there every once in a while. So I expect that it'll be gone in a week or two. And I emailed out the schedule for the rest of the season to all the assistants so that they could comment on any conflicts or if anybody's going to be away. I wanted to get that done ahead of time. So that's the bulk of the Harbor Master projects. I have not been down to move into the Shellfish Constable activity unless there are questions.
Nope. Go ahead.
All right. I'm planning to get back this month to do an August sample for Blackwater River to get some data that we can compare with the environmental police and our lab, see that they're giving us good numbers. I did not get down there in July. I did get May and June results. They were both the same. My suspicion as I read the report is that the units are different and that the environmental marine fisheries, they report on the number of fecal coliform units per deciliter, and the local lab reports per milliliter. So there's a factor of 10 that they differ by. I mean, the ratios are going to have to be the same, and the ratios are always appropriate and satisfactory, but if I can get deciliter data from the same lab, then we'll have the same units and it'll be comparable numbers and easier to compare. I was overly optimistic when I received the first ones because I didn't notice the different unit report.
So if you fix the math, are we in? Is it looking good or not?
It looks good. It looks just as good. I mean, the requirement is less than 100 fecal coliform units or 110 or 12 per deciliter, tenth of a liter. And they're doing it per milliliter, and they're saying the count is less than 1. Tenth to a milliliter, so maybe if I'm off by a factor of 100, we're still less than 100 units.
Okay.
So, but I'll try and get them on the same scale, and that'll
It
work.
shouldn't matter whether they're on the same scale or not. They can do the math too.
They can, but because I'm going different agencies, I'd like to get them all able to read the same scale.
So no reason why they can't be open?
In my opinion, none, except the marine fisheries may want a few months of their own testing schedule. So, in theory,
The
this
counts
winter
go-
would be enough time.
The counts go up and down based on how often it rains.
How often it rains, I would imagine bird population would be a factor. Summer temperatures may
Right.
increase the
Summer
bacteria count. There is suspicion that one or two people may not be plugged into town sewerage. If that's a factor, the summertime would be a larger number, but May and June have not shown that yet, so.
Good.
So, and the only, from all of the July and August reports, July reports, the citations that have been mailed out, so far I've only received one call, and that was just another boater who sold the boat. But a documented boat, even though they reported to the Coast Guard that they had sold it,